Yes, we are back. We're back with another episode of the Real Podcast of Dallas. Taking a little break, but we're back. Well, I'm back. Dedicating this one for Cindy, Maria. I miss you. We'll be together soon. Just a lot of changes, you know? So this is the Real Podcast of Dallas. It's been a few weeks. We did the best of. How can you get a hold of the podcast? How can you hear this podcast? Well, you can Google it. Google it and you'll see the episodes that come up. You can also catch us on Facebook, YouTube. And thank you for all of you guys that are listening on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And all the other formats. People in China, people in Japan, people in France, people in Italy, people all over. So thank you guys for listening, and I hope that we continue to do this, which we will. Again, I dedicate this to my other co-hosts, Maria and Cindy. On this episode, we're going to discuss being alone, lonely. Yes. Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling sad? What are you feeling? Well, in this episode, we're going to explore that. I hope everybody's doing fine. Greiner, Thomas Jefferson, Medrano, are you out there? This is also for you guys. Chief, Sergeant Master, Sergeant Davis, Sergeant Brown. Hope you guys are well. And everybody else, hope everybody's well. So we had an episode of the Real Podcast of Dallas. Of course, with myself, my two co-hosts. We're working it out so we can start doing this together, but I didn't want to have too much space without doing another episode, so I hope you guys enjoy this. So on this episode, we're going to discuss being alone, feeling alone. Now, we've talked about it in the past. If you check out our past episodes, you'll notice that we have a kind of a theme, and every episode has a theme of mental health, of working with your mental health and keeping your mental health healthy. So I decided to talk about the topic of lonely and being alone. Because it's a reality at times. Sometimes you're going to feel alone, even though there's people around you. Maybe they don't agree with what you're doing or saying, or maybe they don't agree with certain things you believe in. That might make you feel alone. Some of you may be in a different area. Maybe you've had to move and leave your friends behind. I know with the whole COVID, a lot of people felt alone. Maybe you're still isolated. Well, this episode's for you. Feeling alone, it's a normal emotion, even though it doesn't feel good. Sometimes our emotions, even though they're healthy, they don't feel healthy. You're going to feel alone at times. But it's what you do with it. Do you stay in the emotion of lonely and sulk, or do you try to find ways of getting out of that? I know we started this podcast for that very reason. During COVID, people were feeling lonely, isolated, and we decided to do this to keep people company. And if you are listening to it, and you're sitting there just listening, you know, we're there with you. That's why we did this show. Hope you enjoy the music. So what do we do to keep from feeling lonely? How can we keep from feeling lonely? Well, one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to do drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol will only make you more depressed. So if that's what you're doing, you may want to put it down. Isolation is terrible. Sometimes it's good to use social media, maybe reconnect with people. I know a lot of times you can do FaceTime now. So if you haven't seen somebody in a long time, maybe you can FaceTime with them. Reach out to them. I know back in the day, people used to have what they call pen pals, and they would mail letters out to people from all over the world, and it was actually encouraged by schools. It was encouraged to do what they call pen pals. I think now with the whole Facebook and technology, I think you can do FaceTime and things like that. Of course, you got to be safe too. You don't want to be communicating with somebody who isn't who they say they are. So, feeling alone. Alone is a natural thing. It's what you do with it. Are you productive? What about hobbies? Maybe taking a walk. Listening to music. Of course, listening to this podcast, the real podcast of Dallas, right? That should help out a lot. Or not. Well, there's a lot of things you can do. And again, we started this podcast because of that. We wanted to do something that'll keep you company. And those of you that continue to listen to us, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your support. We're going to continue to do this podcast. And again, we'll get the others back on soon. Hope you enjoyed the best of, and catch all the other episodes that we have on the Real Podcast of Dallas, Texas. And I'm coming at you from a undisclosed area. I call it Area 51 and a half. Those of you in Dallas, I miss you. So we're talking about lonely, being alone, feeling alone. Ways of coping with it. What are your ways of coping with it? Are you using positive methods to cope with your loneliness, or are you self-harming? Asking for help. Sometimes when you feel alone, feel like there's no one else there for you, it's good to ask for help. Just some advice, if you guys have ever thought about maybe going to counseling, or maybe you had a bad experience with a counselor, I'll give you some advice. When you go to the counselor, be specific on what you need. Be specific on what you want. Don't play the guessing game with your therapist. Let them know directly, this is what I want to work on. This is what I want to explore. A lot of times we go ask for help, and then it's a guessing game. You know, what's wrong with you? And sometimes, we just need to be direct. This is what I need. Those of you in recovery, if you're in recovery and you're feeling alone, again, ask for help and don't be embarrassed. If you have cravings, if the aloneness caused you cravings, don't be afraid. Recovery, by the way, recovery is not something that you master. Recovery is something that you live. It's not about being, the strongest. It's not about being weak. It's really about just living your life. If you know somebody who's in recovery, reach out to them. Just let them know, hey, how are you? Just thinking of you. Send them a text. Communication. Pick up the phone. Just let people know how they are. And be receptive. A lot of times, people call or text you and you may not be as receptive. You may be bothered by them. There's nothing wrong with them just checking up on you. Or you checking up on them. So feeling lonely. One of the reasons we choose this music is because we want you to, make it a little bit lighter. Bring a little bit of happiness. And again, you're listening to the Real Podcast of Dallas. Dedicating this episode to Cindy and Maria. They'll be with us soon. So if you're feeling lonely, we're talking about feeling lonely and finding things to do. Sometimes we have gifts. Sometimes we have skills. Sometimes we don't share those. Maybe reaching out and sharing them. You ever thought of that? Maybe you need to restart a hobby or start a hobby. Definitely not be alone. When you're alone, it's just what you make of it. You can make the best of it. You can make it worse. If you're to the point of self-harming, get some help. Look for some counseling. Support groups are good. I know Facebook has a lot of support groups, especially if you're feeling alone. Reach out to them. Be the support. If there's someone that maybe you work with, or is there someone that living in the area you live in, and maybe you notice they're alone, reach out to them. Just a simple, hello, how are you? A lot of times we get so guarded that we don't reach out to people. I hope you're doing well. So when we're talking about being alone, feeling lonely, again, it's a normal feeling. We're going to go through it at times. It's just what you do with it. It's where it takes you. Does it take you to think of self-harming? Does it take you to a dark place? If it does, you've got to find hope. For those of you in recovery, higher power. I know when I feel lonely, music helps me out. Also, you have to be careful what you listen to. If it's something that's too depressing, you might have to get something that's upbeat. For those of you that are in school, you go home and you feel lonely. Maybe your parents work.